Welcome everyone to this RetailWire webinar, How to Differentiate Modern POS from the Rest in partnership with Jumpmind. Point of sale used to just mean the checkout counter in store, but now it's become so much more than that. It's really about the whole service experience, with customers able to check out in different ways on their phones or anywhere in the store. Today I'm joined by Lauren Cevallos, Head of Strategy and Customer Success at Jumpmind, and Varon, Principal Analyst at Forrester, to explore how leading retailers are redefining POS, where AI and connected data fit in, and what it really takes to create a seamless in-store experience. Welcome, Lily. Welcome, Lauren.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. It's great to have you both with us. So to kick things off, can you each introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about your background in this space?
I'll go first. I've been with Jumpmind for a little over a year now, and in this role, I get to talk to our customers all day long about kind of the big picture initiatives they have for their stores, which is very exciting. And I get to bring that back as voice of the customer to our product and engineering teams, and it really shapes our roadmap and everything we're continuing to build. Prior to that role, I was actually an analyst covering the market and got to take more of a macro view of where the market was moving. Even prior to that, I was a practitioner. So I was in a few different roles, from digital to overseeing even call center operations. So I've really seen kind of a holistic view of things and how it's changing. So I'm really excited to be here today, speaking with my ex-colleague, Lily.
Yay! It's so great to be here and to be chatting with you. I am a market research analyst. That is my role. I look exactly like Lauren said at those macro trends, and specifically, I've been focusing on digital business strategy for the better part of a decade, more than that now, and in the last few years have dedicated a ton of time looking at the point of sale, point of service market in particular. So talking with merchants and with the vendors to understand the good, better, best of it all, and the joys and sorrows that come along with this technology.
Thank you both for that intro to set the scene. So many retailers still think POS means checkout. Can you walk us through point of sale versus point of service?
This is exactly the transformation that's been happening over the course of the last few years. I think in some ways there's sort of two reasons why I think there's a reason, good justification to shift the terminology here. One is that there's just accumulated frustration with point of sale, like legacy point of sale technology, which did really focus on simplifying that checkout experience in the store. But it was very, very transaction focused. And I think in the advent of e-commerce, in the sort of evolution of omni-channel, and in mature markets and sometimes tough macroeconomic environments, wanting to chase profit and chase loyalty and gain wallet share from your existing customers means that we're trying to really, really optimize store operations, really optimize those client engagement moments. And the point of sale, point of service software shifts from that sale focus, just that pure transactional focus, to much more about optimizing both the sort of empowering that sales associate or store associate, and connecting a lot of the data, the broad data that the enterprise has on the customer, and optimize workflows and things like that. And so it really shifts, the aperture kind of opens from that sale to the broader sort of service of the users, the store associates, or whoever's actually sort of interfacing with the software, and to that supporting that broader customer journey.
I love the visual of the aperture expanding, because I think that totally hits it. For us, our customers really see their physical stores as their competitive advantage. And so they're always thinking about how to make that experience more engaging, for customers, how how to make it more convenient, and really just make it worth the trip of going to the store. So increasingly, that means they're thinking about additional services, to increase stickiness or whatnot. And that might be being able to accept a trade-in or a buyback, being able to process a special order, a service order. Again, all in support of giving customers more reasons to get in, being able to serve them for whatever need happens to come up. And what that does is it creates really a lot of complexity for associates. And our goal as a technology company is always to reduce the cognitive load for those associates. And how do we bring more those functions into, a single pane of glass, as they call it. So checkout is still very much there in those moments, in all of those flows. It's just different. And so we think from, again, a technology standpoint, a lot of the opportunity challenges in the design aspect of that. How are we making that easy for store associates to navigate from one flow to another in a seamless manner, so that way the customer isn't standing there, waiting a really long time or feeling confused by the interaction. So for us, that's sort of how we think about point of service versus just point of sale.
So what is the sort of misconceptions or confusions when it comes to the POS market today?
Well, there's a number. I mean, I think part of the discussion is really breaking that reputational damage of kind of the point of sale of yesteryear, of this monolith, of this sort of heavyweight, unchangeable, walled garden of data or function. And I think that there's also this sense of, and maybe this misconception, that more modern solutions won't meet your needs, right? Like, I think that there's this sense that I have to custom build what I need. My processes are so bespoke. My infrastructure is so important to control, right? Like I must customize. And I think that that's going by the wayside. Like, I think that the monolith is breaking. The modern solutions are kind of part of their core functionality is to, because they're focusing on more than just that checkout moment, they're actually much more deeply embedded into the store operations and optimizing how your business operates in that critical touch point for your customer and for that huge driver of revenue for your business. So we start to see things like really sophisticated extensibility tooling, right? And things like that let the merchants tailor the solutions to their own processes, and the modularization of the software so that you can inject an application, either a custom built application or a third party application, into that flow. Lauren, I think what you talked about in terms of that one single pane of glass, but having kind of workflows and processes that may be supported by other applications, or modules that are relevant for specific use cases like food and beverage, but might be useful for a retailer who might have coffee coming to a fitting room or something like that, or might be launching a cafe. So I think that there's those two things that are really sort of misconstrued. One is that there hasn't been that much progress. This technology is kind of a laggard, which I think the laggardness is true. Like, I think that there, in terms of cloud adoption and things like that, it's been sort of slower than some of the digital technologies that we've seen, the e-commerce ones, for example. But in some ways, I think that the reputational damage is holding on too long, right? There's modernization and really sophisticated, exciting re-architecting and redesign of these products that really does fit the modern era.
I couldn't agree more. I think there's a lot of confusion right now. If you're a buyer today and you haven't been in the market for a long time because you've been satisfied with your POS, say for 10 years, And now maybe end of life for hardware is coming up, and you're suddenly like in a new buying cycle, and you're sort of, looking above ground a little bit at the market. I think it is very confusing to know, how do you compare vendors sort of like apples to apples when they do so many different things? So I think there is a lot of buyer confusion that's exacerbated by terms like unified commerce, which it makes it so squishy. Like, what are the different capabilities POS offers? How do they do so? So I actually just want to shine a light on Forrester's research, because I love the report series, demystifying the technical functions of X category, in this case, POS, because it's a super useful buyer's guide to say, for a market, here's what's core. Here are the features that this category must serve, or it's not part of that category. And then here are I think extended is still the right term. Is that right, Lily? Here are the extended functions. So here are the things that might not show up with every vendor, but here's what to look for. Here's where they maybe differentiate. So for us, that second category has grown a lot. It's become very rich and interesting. And so, for us, clienteling is an example of how POS is absorbing capabilities that were previously like in a point solution, for instance. So I think those types of buyer guides, however the market, can kind of help try to standardize the language, which again, Forrester does super well and is committed to that. I think that's a very useful tool for buyers right now.
I will add to that. I think that thank you for the callback to that research. I think one of the things that is really confusing is that those common or extended functions vary based on what your conception of POS has been, right? If you have not looked up, researched the category in 10, 15 years, you might think of workforce management or labor management as a core function of your POS. It's a common function. It's a extended function where more POS solutions are building there, or loss prevention, or clienteling. Great example. Not all POS solutions think of that as core. They think of that as sort of either third party, or maybe we should be building here, order management, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's a lot of that. There's a long tail of those kind of extended functions or common functions that do add a lot of confusion, where you have those core that is maybe the nucleus of POS. And then as a merchant or retailer, you have to kind of matchmake with those extended functions who your best partner is by their strategic focus on the ones that are most important to you. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree there.
So quite a big question next. How do you decide if a POS system is great?
So it's a great segue, because it's partly that, right? It is determining sort of where they're putting their strategic bets on some of those more extended functions. Self-checkout, is that important to you or not? Clienteling, how important is that to you? How deeply embedded into your corporate communications should this, application be? How do you think about that there? And so I think that's step one, right? The other thing is, I think there's a few common areas where I see that I think investment from a vendor is really important. So one is in its role in updating your systems of record. So like a hot take, a POS isn't actually a system of record of anything. It captures data, but its system of record is in sole purpose of updating other systems of record. Customer data, product data, inventory data, accounting systems, tax reporting system, like all of these crucial, it's a system of record of transactions, but those transactions serve to update other systems of record. And so I think that focus on how it plugs in from an architecture and kind of data flow perspective into your ecosystem, and what how the company has designed or emphasized that data ingestion and extraction. And if we want to talk good, better, best there, I think the next level is really how the system orchestrates and augments that data for intelligence, for helping, your merchandising, helping your sales associate be more effective, et cetera. So it's that next level of like contextualizing that data and orchestrating it for different useful purposes. I think that's kind of a really interesting area of modernization, and where one can determine, your sort of fit with a vendor in that way. I think the other thing is the extensibility tooling, which is to say, if you've got engineering prowess and you've got some technical acumen, how does the kind of extensibility strategy and tool set from your vendor match your expectations and your needs there? And then I'm going to give a softball here, because I know that this is something that Lauren feels really, really passionate about. But I would say the next piece is design, right? Design principles, design standards. Because to Lauren's point from earlier, right? How is the system kind of accepted and used by the people using it? Design has a huge part of that, right? Accessibility, intuitiveness. So that's another big place I think is really interesting to explore. But I know, Lauren, you have thoughts there.
Your comment about how POS contextual, like it's not the system of record, but it is strategic and like drives goals based on how it sort of augments and contextualizes, is so on point. Like one example, a conversation I have with a lot of our customers right now is like their CRM data. They're even investing in a new CRM. So they're always looking to leverage, tools to help grow their customer database and make it richer. There might be lots of gaps right now with like data. They don't have a full picture of their customer. We don't own that data, but we're certainly a driving force in how the associate can better engage with customers to better understand the customer and bring that into POS in a structured way, understanding more about their preferences, their likes, their dislikes, maybe their family members, all kinds of things that you really only learn about the customer when you're sort of in that human to human mode. And so we need to make that easy for the associate to capture, bring into POS. And then, yes, that gets fed into the actual system of record. But this is why we're seeing, and maybe we'll get into it, but this is why we're seeing more sort of decision makers at the table, such as like from marketing, from loyalty, because they're starting to see POS as a big driver of those goals. So I love that point. And design is a crucial aspect of it. We see competitor solutions that, quite frankly, try to put too much in front of the associate, like dashboards and KPIs and charts and this and that. And it might look really pretty during a demo, but quite frankly, when you're a store associate, when you're a 16-year-old, and it's a crazy day and tons of customers are coming in, maybe it's Black Friday, you have to ask, is that information actually very useful? Like, is it really driving a better customer experience? Maybe it would if it was in the summer and it was downtime, but probably not when throughput is the most important, goal for that season. So we think very much about how does the associate get to hide things that aren't valuable and then surface it in the moment when it is valuable. It's kind of a simple concept, but again, it's not something that we typically see from other solutions. That aside, good to great. I think of it in a very practical sense. Now that I'm kind of on the software side and talking to customers, like I hear things like offline experience, like good is, are you fully supported as a retailer offline? And does the associate, is it clear to the associate that they're offline and what's available being offline? That's something that is good. And I think table stakes. Great. I think time to value is the hallmark of a really great POS solution. So, I mean, really quickly, just a few customer examples for what we see. The paper store, they were able to reduce training from, I want to say it was like maybe 3 hours down to 30 minutes for their associates, just because the POS was so much more intuitive, for them to use. In terms of deployments, Bath and Body Works, they were able to deploy the Jumpmind software to 123 stores in one single night with no on-site technicians there. So, you think about, like, they started the day with their legacy solution. Overnight, they switched over to Jumpmind. Nobody had to like fly in or come on site. They were able to update that and ultimately rolled out to like 1,800 plus stores over a couple months. DTLR, which is part of JD Sports, did the same thing. They were able to effectively deploy remotely the Jumpmind software to 200 stores when they switched their brand from City Gear to DTLR. So again, it might not sound like the kind of sexiest thing, like that speed to value deployment, but really, like, it makes all the difference in terms of a retailer able to finally get on modern software and begin using it and starting to reap the benefits of it.
Yeah, that speed really is very important. So Lily, your research at Forrester shows that retailers are building custom POS. What are the main drivers pushing them away from packaged solutions?
It is fascinating data. So what we saw was, we asked POS buyers, right, that have POS or in the process of buying POS, we said, well, how are you acquiring this technology? Is it from a single vendor, a single packaged application? Is it a custom built solution? Is it a packaged application that you heavily customized? Is it that you're assembling modules from a single vendor or assembling modules from multiple vendors? And what is sort of shocking is that, and maybe not shocking, but what was interesting to see was that the greatest, and then we asked, so the greatest share was single package, application from a single package vendor. That was the largest share. And then custom built was the big bucket. There was sort of, I think 60% of the use cases today were fit in those two buckets. When we asked those, how do you expect to buy your POS solution down the line, your next POS solution, the answers were much more diversified. They were much more spread across all of those options. And the single group that lost the most was that single packaged application, right? It is now, will represent a much smaller share of the overall pie. And I think part of it is because exactly what we've been talking about so far, which is, there is this long tail of extended or common but not core functions of POS. We have different store formats that are pushing the envelope for the kinds of business processes that need to be supported. We have, more modularity from the vendors themselves that are actually recognizing the need to open up and accept data from third-party systems, incorporate mini apps from third-party systems, or support app generation from the merchants themselves. And so there is this I think in a continuation of this concept of breaking the monolith is also kind of, all of the modern application development kind of practices of openness and flexibility and being able to extend and integrate software that is opening up the possibility for merchants to kind of choose modules, pick and choose, and work with, different vendors. We might even see a future where sort of, I cover payments too, payments processing, right? And we see this kind of multi-PSP approach where we have for redundancy, but also for optimization, I'm going to route transactions, certain bins to this vendor versus this vendor. We might see a future where the POS is equally kind of used much more strategically across our enterprise, where we have some brands where one POS works and another, but we have sort of a more, we work on the sort of centralization and decentralization of that data really strategically across the multiple vendors. So the data really demonstrates this kind of everything we've been talking about so far, of openness, modernizing and migrating to a much more of an assembly of modules rather than buying a packaged application?
I think the how you build is so important, because something that, we talk about is that the first, say the first 60% of a POS is pretty well documented and known. But that extra bit, and again, going back to like offline resiliency, is so difficult. Like, why would you want to completely own everything yourself? Because the moment you build your POS, that maintenance treadmill starts. Mm-hmm. Now you're just maintaining it. Maybe you're dedicating, your best IT people just now their support, not to mention thinking about innovation, what's the market doing. So while you're still just maintaining your solution, the vendor that you didn't choose has already probably shipped 40 new features, right? And they're continuing to think about what's happening. That said, I understand where that kind of desire to control your own destiny, quote unquote, comes from. I think it comes from a lot of different things. So we really think about how do we embrace like a retailer's like builder DNA. For instance, one of our customers, global multi-brand fashion retailer, they did the kind of build and maintain their own thing. And they felt like it wasn't making the best use of their resources. It wasn't really differentiating for them. So the approach is, to partner with Jumpmind. You get the benefits of the core solution, the innovation, but then as to Lily's point, that extensibility piece is so important. And I think where it can be really fun for a retailer to even maybe leverage AI coding tools, to build something totally new, but it's protected in the extension layer. So from a technology perspective, that's what we think about. We want to continue offering like the best core solution and bring innovation, but allow our customers to embrace building, so that they can continue to experiment and really think about what's differentiating for them.
There's something there too that I think is interesting about, this idea of the product engineer should be similar to design. There should be sort of domain experts. There should be a practice of research and development around industry, right? So design certainly, but also industry, right? How much of a partnership are you getting with your vendor, but which is more qualitative and can be kind of about company culture and things like this. But it's also how much of the best practices do you expect to consume from the core product itself, right? And that's something I've heard merchants say, sort of, like, we don't want to own this. We want the customization. We want to meet our bespoke requirements, but we also really want to keep focusing on what's next and how to grow and how to be best in class at our business. And sometimes it's like, so someone uses the term like sort of subscribing to innovation, mm-hmm. by partnering with specific vendors versus other vendors, which is what is going to be in their expertise. How good are they at using the insights and the best practices that they're learning from their other customers to bring to bear for you? Like, how do they make sure that the rising tides raise all boats? And that's really interesting to me. It's like, how do we assess a vendor's domain expertise and for our industry, our use cases? And sometimes our use cases are not specific to our industry. They might come from other industries that we need that domain expertise. So I think there's something there too that is like, how does relying on that vendor and assessing that vendor's sort of product design principles and domain expertise, like how do we gain from that in the core product, core functionality as we move forward?
I have one more example now that Lily is bringing it up. I think that subscription to innovation is so interesting. And so one example for us, we're working with Build-A-Bear on this new sort of experiential flagship store that they have. And they sort of came to us and said, hey, look, we want to enable a new experience that we haven't done before. So we had discussions, talked about the vision. Part of that experience entailed like a kind of cafe, quick grab and go type experience. We were able to, build that for them. It's going to be really exciting when it launches. We have other customers that are thinking about their own flagship stores, and they had maybe toyed around with the idea of a cafe, but maybe the idea of actually doing it was so daunting because maybe they thought, well, gosh, now we have to go to market and maybe buy a separate POS solution, or maybe, well, I won't name others, but something that's maybe we think is more suited to that. But gosh, like our use case seems like it shouldn't be that big of a deal to where we need another solution. I mean, you can see where decisions stall. Well, because we've already partnered with the customer and we're doing it now, our other customers can really benefit from those innovations and the work that's already been done. So I do think that there is something to that, Lily. Like when you are partnering with a vendor that works with, again, with retailers that are continuing to invest in their store experience, you're part of that group now, that's really thinking heavily about how that's evolving. So anyway, I love that you mentioned that. Subscribe to innovation. I'm going to have to use that myself.
So on that note of innovation, do you, Lauren, do you have any sort of a narrative around AI at Jumpmind?
Oh boy, AI, yes. So we think that AI is useful when it removes friction for associates, not when it replaces humans. And one example of this, we have customers like American Eagle that are using some of our native clienteling capabilities, such as appointments or consultations. It's really great, because those types of capabilities can increase foot traffic to the store, can increase consumer loyalty as a result. And then you start to see like this halo effect where your e-commerce sales even are growing because you're getting more foot traffic, to certain stores. And so when you look at e-com sales, customers that are near a store end up buying more. So it's really strategic. So we think about, how does AI really help the associate who's preparing for that visit? The customer is going to be coming in for an appointment. The associates probably has 20 things on their list to do. How can we make that time to prepare even shorter? And we think that's a really strong use case because the associates just there, maybe by themselves preparing, and instead of tabbing through a million different things, trying to get the full picture, they can get it in a summary. And then when the customer walks through the door, again, like the associate has a 10-second read on that customer. So we think that there's incredible value, but ultimately it's still going to be the associate that's able to use their best judgment, right? And how they're actually going to interact with that customer.
So the customer journey is really important right now, especially since many retailers are using a mix of different systems that don't actually work that well together. So how can retailers create a more consistent branded experience across the whole journey through POS? Can you walk us through that?
Who should go first?
Oh, if we had a simple answer to that, we would be like lounging on a yacht somewhere. It's really objectively very difficult. It is really hard because you have so many different systems of record, and if you're a big brand and you have a global footprint and you have maybe different models like franchise models or things like this that really kind of complicate execution. There's great opportunity there, but it adds complexity, and so I think there's sort of two big pieces of advice I might have, which is one, give yourself permission to start where you can. So I think we love, as analysts too, but even sort of journalists and think tanks, we love to talk about the art of the possible. We love to talk about, really progressive use cases and what customer expectations are and how, we get there. But the reality is that a lot of people are struggling, right? And so I think when we take a hard look at kind of digital experience benchmarks and omni-channel experience benchmarks, okay is kind of the best that we can hope for, right? The experiences that we're delivering today really aren't maximizing kind of loyalty. I think starting with customer journey mapping and having really, really solid foundations in place, understanding customer journeys. And this is a really wonderful opportunity to break down those sort of channel silos, because we might have a customer journey for our store, a customer journey for digital, a customer journey as we think about marketing and comms. Like, how do we start bringing a much more holistic customer journey to start with, right? And that means using your own data. It means relying on best practices in journey mapping. It might even be looking at things like journey orchestration solutions, which is a technology category, right? That is not, it is part of what POS does, but it, et cetera. So I think that the first piece is really giving yourself permission to start where you are, which may not be perfect, and not be sort of chasing your competitors or always looking at the reality, and starting with creating a really good roadmap of low-hanging fruit and chasing the feasible. Sometimes organizational silos don't let you deliver that beautiful omni-channel journey. And so it might be small wins and that are within your kind of either store operations preview or IT preview or digital preview. And that's okay too. So I think sometimes it's not even the POS selection that has to happen first. Sometimes it's sort of these process and organizational things that need to happen, structural things that need to happen, or because the data layers we've talked about is so important, sometimes it's about figuring out your database management and your data stores, because your POS is only going to be as strong as those third-party data, that data kind of system of record updating that the POS needs to do. It only works when your kind of systems of record or your data management strategy is strong within the organization. So I feel like that's sort of nebulous and not especially POS specific, but I think it's really, sometimes we need to step off the gas pedal a bit and have a reality check. And sometimes it takes a third party telling you that that's okay to do it. So take this opportunity if you need it. And then the other piece is really looking at the data across the organization and what you will need to do in order to make a new POS work, given that it is such a critical kind of updater of those third-party systems.
I imagine there'll be at least one sigh of relief, like, oh, we're not the only ones that feel behind. From our side, one big opportunity we see is kind of back to POS roots, is like the moment at the register. Has enormous potential to be a branded experience. So, I mean, what we've noticed is some retailers will spend so much energy kind of creating an amazing in-store experience with like personalized service, again, like consultations, expert advice, but then the customer walks up to the register and it feels super transactional. Like maybe it's kind of the experience falls off a cliff a little bit. And so what we did, like with the Vitamin Shop as an example, is we reimagined that moment by making the checkout more interactive. So, essentially, like it's that customer facing display, like very specific from a solution standpoint, but it's really about like what you're surfacing there in that moment so that the customer can sort of check their loyalty points, which we know is actually quite difficult. Like many consumers today, like don't know where they stand in terms of a customer's loyalty program. And it's not very easy for them to redeem their points. So we pull that out, in front of the customer so that they can take that step themselves, look at promotions, recommendations, maybe even a retail media video, if that's something the retailer does. All the while, the associate continues to scan items, detag, bag things up, doing all the stuff that they have to continue to do. But now the customer's got something to interact with. And so we're seeing that drive, revenue in terms of like new subscription signups. increase like loyalty signups and redemption. So we do, like, as a technology provider, we do think about all the opportunity within that just like most basic checkout experience, and how to make that more engaging versus just transactional.
Okay, I've got one last question before we wrap up. So point of sale used to be mainly a finance decision, but now so many teams are involved in the whole process, such as marketing, operations, and many more. So how should retailers approach POS decisions today when so many teams are involved? I can imagine it would get very chaotic, lots of opinions, and yeah. So we can.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's necessary, right? If we're talking about how this software is evolving, all the different parts of the organization that it touches, store operations and loss prevention, finance and compliance, IT and security, certainly, right? Digital and marketing as well. Necessary stakeholders for a point of service if we're thinking about it as a point of service. And so the consortium is maybe that complexity or that chaos is a necessary evil, but I think that the outcome will be better for it. And I think that there's, the way that you can kind of rally all teams is to have, those North Stars, right? Everyone is working on increasing sales or reducing checkout time or increasing footfall or traffic, right? Driving up basket values, maybe reducing waste, maximizing profits, like whatever that handful of North Stars are, focusing on that where there is consensus or where the requirements might extend or let's say sort of thinking of those North Stars, those KPIs as kind of magnets, and what capabilities or functions have the strongest kind of magnetic attraction to those KPIs. That is how we keep everyone focused. And so it is, I think, I would caution folks not to run away from that complexity of involving those stakeholders. Sometimes it means you need an executive sponsor. You need someone with enough power in the organization to make some tough calls or to have the sway to get everyone away from their day jobs in order to focus on this project of vendor selection or of vendor assessment. And so if you find that chaos is getting a bit unwieldy, maybe it's time to kind of rally an executive champion. And if you are an executive listening, it's a really good opportunity to get to that story. What is the so what? Why do we want people to spend time on this? What's in it for them? And how do we address their concerns, but also excite them about the future? So it is necessary, but hopefully there are ways in which you can sort of lessen the downsides of that many cooks in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm. We're certainly seeing a more diverse group that are coming to the table, which I think is a great sign for the market, that POS is being seen as more strategic. I always think the best advice is to ask whoever you're assessing, like, show us the demo. And so being able to have really crisp, like, scenarios, like, what do we want to see from the solution? And it can take into account, the experience, that you're aiming to create for your associates. Show us how the associate would do XYZ, how the customer would do XYZ. I think it's just, to be expected now that that vendors are going to have to actually show, not just tell, how they're enabling these great experiences and what that looks like. So I think that would be my advice, is like, do the demo. Get to the point where you're even doing a POC, make sure it really is, the right solution for you. And, if the partner can't really get to the point where they're able to show it, then that's information, that you can kind of take back to the team.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Lily. That's a very informative session. So I've taken so many mental notes, and I'm sure our audience have too. Thanks everyone for joining. And if you have missed it, you can catch it on demand.
It's a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.